Good day, everyone. Welcome to Applied Physics, Semiconductor Physics, which is part of Module 12. This is only part 1 of this topic. For the session outline, we have the definition of energy levels and energy bands, types of materials with examples, and intrinsic and extrinsic semiconductors, and the p-n diode and its characteristics. For the first activity, we are going to classify the sets of pictures as to conductor, insulator, or semiconductor. Okay, of course, for the first set, these are examples of insulators. In the second set are semiconductors. For the last one, of course, are examples of conductors. But what makes this material insulator in semiconductor and conductor? We will find out in the next learning station, which is the energy levels. The definition of energy levels is based on Bohr's explanation, of which he considered the electrons as particles moving around the nucleus in fixed circular orbits. We can see in the diagram of energy level from color green, blue, orange, and violet. So these are the orbits. And these orbits are found at definite distances from the nucleus, known as energy levels, and so on and so forth. 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. According to Bohr, electrons in each orbit have a definite energy, which increases as the distance of the orbit from the nucleus increases. Meaning, if the orbital is close to the nucleus, it has the lowest energy level, and as the energy level goes farther away from the nucleus, it will have a higher energy level. Now, if the electron stays in its orbit, there is no absorption or emission of energy. When an electron is placed in the lowest stationary state or energy level possible, it is said to be in a ground state. So no absorption, no emission of energy. So electron is in ground state. Now, we have here in figure 3, what if there is absorption of extra energy, like from a flame or from an electric arc? Therefore, the electron will move to a higher energy level. So for example, N1, energy level 1, if it absorbs extra energy, it will jump up to the second energy level or even to the third energy level, depending on the amount of energy absorbed. And therefore, that electron is considered an excited, or the atom is now an excited atom, and the atom is unstable. Again, the electron is excited because of the absorption of energy, and it will jump to a higher energy level, and the atom is unstable. Now, if the electron releases energy or emits energy, it will jump down or return to any of the lower energy level. So one way to tell that the electron has released energy is in the form of light, like the release of flame. And then we have here the flame test color. If we do not know what kind of element we have, an unknown element, we can use the flame test colors, because as the electron releases energy, it will jump down and release flame, and no atom would have the same color of flame. Like for example, you have the lithium there, it's red, the sodium, it's yellow, potassium is light blue. So no same color for any kind of element. They have different colors. We can use this one. As a result of the model, electrons are described as occupying fixed energy levels at a certain distance from the nucleus of an atom. But at present, the Bohr's model of the atom was not sufficient enough to describe atoms with more than one electron. So it is no longer accepted, the Bohr model, but the concept of energy level is still anchored to Bohr's atomic model. So let's check our learning from station level 1. We have here number 1. Describe the energy level by Bohr from the nearest to the farthest from the nucleus of an atom. Okay, of course, the nearest energy level to the nucleus would have the lowest energy, and the farthest have the highest energy level. Next is number 2. Can electron jump up from one level to the next, and why? Yes, it can. If it absorbs extra energy, it can jump up to second, third, or even higher depending on the amount of energy absorbed. Like when it absorbs from a flame or from the heat energy. Next, number 3, can electron go down from high to low energy level? And why? Yes, if the electron emits energy like in the form of light or heat, so it will go down from the higher to the lower energy level. And one way to tell is the release of flame. Next, number 4, what happens when one electron goes down a level? Okay, it will go down as it releases, as it goes down, the number 3 and number 4 are related questions. As it goes down from higher to lower energy, it will release a flame. So the light energy in the form of flame. Okay, that's it for our energy level definition anchored on Bohr's atomic model. Let's now proceed to learning station 2, of which we are going to define energy bands and cite examples of materials based on this energy band theory. Okay, we have here a diagram of solid, liquid, and gas. Which do you think is solid? Which do you think is liquid and gas? Okay, so we have here the red particles moving very fast. The fastest actually among the 3 diagrams. Of course, these are the gas particles. Okay, so the darker blue particles are the liquid particles. And here we have the light blue ones are the solid particles. So as you can see, in solids, they are arranged closely so that the electrons within the molecules move into the neighboring atoms' orbitals. Okay, you have here the atom on the diagram, the orbitals, atomic orbitals. And then, because they are close, the atomic orbitals overlap each other, forming molecular orbitals in solids. Okay, so because of that arrangement, we have what we call the energy band in solids. These are ranges of energy that electrons within a solid can have. These bands are formed due to the overlap of atomic orbitals in a solid, leading to the formation of allowed energy levels where electrons can exist. Now, we have a theory here. As we know, a solid atom has various energy bands filled with electrons. In all these energy bands, the electrons remain bound to the nucleus and have distinct energy levels. The electrons present in the outermost energy band of an atom are called valence electrons, and the outermost band itself is called the valence band. So look at the diagram here. You have there the band energy, and then there is what we call the forbidden energy gap. Okay, so you see here the diagram of the valence band. So for valence band, again, it is the band of energy where all the valence electrons reside and are involved in the highest energy molecular orbital. You can see in the diagram, it's color orange. And look at the electrons in the diagram below, the red ones. So these are the valence electrons in the valence band. The second type is the conduction band. Okay, the conduction band also has electrons, but these electrons are not bound to the nucleus of the atom and are thus called free electrons or conductive electrons. The electricity passes through solids because of these free electrons present in the conduction band. So look at this one here. So you can see the conduction band nearest to the nucleus, and they are mobile or free electrons. Okay, now if you notice, a while ago you saw the forbidden band gap. Okay, the forbidden band gap is actually the distance between the valence band and the conduction bands. We also have what we call Fermi level energy. What is this? Okay, what is this? The Fermi level is the energy level at which the probability of finding an electron is 50% at absolute zero temperature. It plays a crucial role in determining the electrical properties of materials. Like in metals, the Fermi level lies within the conduction band, while in semiconductors and insulators, it lies within the band gap or the forbidden band gap. Now, you look at this diagram, there is a rising temperature. It means that there is increasing, and if there is increasing temperature, meaning the atom has received energy. Okay? Now, if the Fermi level, this is the maximum probability of finding electron at absolute zero temperature. What is Fermi level in the semiconductors? The Fermi level, denoted as EF, is present between the valence band and conduction band. It is the highest occupied molecular orbital at absolute zero. The charge carriers in this state have their own quantum states and generally do not interact with each other. But when the temperature again rises at above absolute zero, these charge carriers will begin to occupy states above the Fermi level. So from Fermi level, it can go above. So it can reach the conduction band. Going back to the forbidden gap, which is between the conduction band and the valence band, based on the energy band theory, the band is forbidden because it has without energy. So, therefore, there is no electron flow in this band. The flow of electrons from the valence to conduction will pass through this gap. If this gap is greater, then the electrons in the valence band are strongly bound toward the nucleus. And at present, in order to drive the electrons out from this band, a little outside force is necessary, which is equivalent to the forbidden energy gap. So the force must be, again, equivalent to the forbidden energy gap. So we have here the diagram of the energy band gap between these three types of materials. Look at how huge the gap between insulators, but in semiconductor is closer. Now in conductor, it's much closer. This band gap is the amount of energy a valence electron must possess so that it can jump from the valence band to the conduction band. Okay, that's the reason why if you look at the metals, there's actually look at the diagram here, there's actually an overlap between the conduction band and the valence band. For semiconductors, the gap is much closer, no? But in insulators, it's too large. Okay, look at this one. So therefore, in insulators, it takes a huge amount of energy for the electron to jump from valence band to conduction band. That is why insulators cannot conduct electricity. That's the reason why. It's too huge. The gap is too huge and requires so much energy. Okay, now for examples, we have the rubber, wood, plastic, and glass, etc. These are examples of insulators. Now for conductors, there is now very small and actually there is an overlap. Once again, overlap between the valence band and the conduction band. There is no forbidden gap, and the number of electrons of free electrons available at room temperature is large. So because of that, they can freely move from conduction to or from valence to conduction band. And then the electrons in metals are referred to as sea of electrons floating around. This is one of the distinguishing characteristics of metals, that they are all conductors. They might not be shiny, they might not be malleable, but they are all conductors because there is no band gap. Okay, we have here examples of these such as aluminum, iron, copper, silver. Okay, now for semiconductors, look at the gap. It's only small, so compared to insulator. So there is only less amount of energy for electrons to jump from valence to conduction band. If it receives extra energy, therefore, the electrons can easily jump because of small gap. Therefore, um, if they received extra energy, they can conduct electricity, especially at the higher temperature when they receive heat. So example are silicon and germanium. They are they're the most common semiconductors. Now, as I said a while ago, that when semiconductor receives energy, heat energy, for example, there is a rise of temperature, therefore, and the gap or the electrons can move freely. So you can see there the gap is going down when the temperature rises. Now, what is the importance of understanding energy bands? Yes, it is crucial for designing and optimizing electronic devices like transistors, diodes, and photovoltaic cells. It helps engineers manipulate the electrical properties of materials to create components with desired characteristics. Number 3, the band in which the electrons move freely is known as the conduction. Now, why can insulators conduct electricity based on energy band theory? Yes, the band gap between valence band and conduction band is too large. That electrons do not have sufficient energy to jump from valence to conduction band. And the probability of finding an electron in the conduction band approaches zero. An insulator material won't conduct any electricity at any temperature. Finally, we are on the last learning station, which we will tackle the intrinsic and extrinsic semiconductors, p-n diode, and its characteristics. So what is a semiconductor? It is a material defined by its ability to conduct electricity, and its conductive properties lie between conductor and insulator, normally ranging between 10 to 6 to 10 to negative 4 ohms to the power of negative 1. To understand how semiconductors are able to um, current flow, we have to mention the holes and electrons. These are the charge carriers accountable for the flow of current in semiconductors. What are holes? These are the valence electrons, which are positively charged electric charge carrier, whereas electrons are the negatively charged particles. Both are equal in magnitude but opposite in polarity. So in the diagram, the hole, which is the positively charged, is color yellow, while the electrons is the negatively charged are the color blue. Oh my God. So the mobility of electrons or the negatively charged is higher than that of the holes, which are the positively charged, because of their different bond structures and scattering mechanisms. The electrons in the conduction band travel, whereas, or the electrons travel in conduction band, whereas holes travel in the valence band. When an electron field is applied, holes cannot move as freely as electrons due to their restricted movement. The elevation of the electrons from their inner shells to higher shells results in the creation of holes in semiconductors. Since the holes experience stronger force by the nucleus than electrons, holes have lower mobility. Alright, so here we have the diagram of the mobility of holes or free electrons over holes. Now, here are the properties of semiconductors. Number 1, semiconductors act like insulators at 0 Kelvin, but on increasing temperature, they work as conductors. Therefore, for number 1, if 0 Kelvin, they are insulators, but if they have increasing temperature, they will act as conductors. Number 2, due to this, they can be modified by doping to make semiconductor devices suitable for energy conversion, switches, and amplifiers. We will talk doping later on. Number 3, they have lesser power losses. And number 4, semiconductors are smaller in size and possess less weight. Number 5, the resistivity is higher than conductors but lesser than insulators. Number 6, the resistance of semiconductor materials decreases with an increase in temperature and vice versa. So there's a mention there in number 5 that conductors have lower resistivity than insulators. What does it mean? Meaning they can, Now we have here the properties of semiconductors. Number 1, if semiconductors are at 0 Kelvin, they will act as insulators, but if the temperature is increasing, they will work as conductors. Number 2, because of these properties, semiconductors can be modified by doping to make them suitable for energy conversion, such as in switches and amplifiers. We will talk about doping later on. Number 3, less power losses. Number 4, they are smaller in size and possess less weight. Their resistivity, number 5, is higher than conductors but lesser than insulators. Number 6, the resistance of semiconductor materials decreases with an increase in temperature and vice versa. Now, there are two types of semiconductors. These are the intrinsic semiconductor and the extrinsic semiconductor. What are intrinsic semiconductor? They are very pure chemically, and it is made up of only a single type of element. Like here on the diagram, these are silicon atoms only. So this is only an element of silicon, very pure. The lattice of pure silicon semiconductor at different temperatures is at 0 Kelvin temperature. The covalent bonds are very strong and there are no free electrons, and the semiconductor behaves as a perfect insulator. But above absolute temperature, like an increase in temperature, a few valence electrons jump into the conduction band and hence it behaves like a poor conductor. Alright, let's take a look at this diagram of intrinsic semiconductor. Letter A, this is at 0 Kelvin temperature. So, behaves like an insulator. In letter B, it receives increase in heat. So, it's now thermally generated electron pairs can move from valence to conduction band. So, it's a poor conductor at increasing temperature. Now, the second type is the extrinsic semiconductor, which can be greatly improved by introducing a small number of suitable replacement atoms called impurities through the process doping. Usually, only one atom in 10 to the power of 7 is replaced by a dopant atom in the doped semiconductor. So, it can be classified again into two. So, you have the N-type semiconductor and the P-type semiconductor. So, here we can see that there is doping or adding of another type of element. The donor here is the lead in the N-type. So it can contribute free electrons. Now for the P-type, there is acceptor impurity which can create a hole. So N stands for negative and P stands for positive. We have a schematic diagram of a silicon crystal lattice doped with impurities to produce N-type. Okay, you can see the electron here from group 5 atom elements and P-type in the semiconductor here, the blue one, from group 3 elements. Now, the negative type semiconductor This is when pure semiconductor like silicon or germanium is doped by pentavalent impurity like phosphorus, astatine, and among others. Then, 4 electrons out of 5 valence electrons bond with the 4 electrons. The 5th electron of the dopant is set free. Thus, the impurity atom donates a free electron for conduction in the lattice and is called a donor. Unlike in intrinsic, there is no free electron, but in extrinsic, because of the donor, there is now a free electron, much like this. Now, since the number of free electrons increases with addition of an impurity, the negative charge carriers increase. That's why it's now called as N-type because of the negative increase in negative charge carriers. Crystal as a whole is neutral, but the donor atom becomes an immobile ion. As conduction is due to a large number of free electrons, the electrons is N-type semiconductor, and these are the majority carriers, and holes are the minority carriers. Remember, holes are the positive electrons, but the N or the electrons are the negative. So again, N-type because of increasing negative charge carriers. Much like this one, the color red are the electrons, which you can see there are more red circles over blue circles. So more negative electrons. That's why it's N-type. Now for P-type, of course, more positive. This is when a semiconductor is doped with trivalent impurity like boron, aluminum, and so on. Then, the 3 valence electrons of the impurity bond with 3 of the 4 valence electrons of the semiconductor. Because of this, there is now absence of electron or there is now hole in the impurity. These impurity atoms, which are ready to accept bonded electrons, are called acceptors. Now, with the increase of number of impurities, holes or the positive charge are increased. So, more positive charge, that's why it's called a P-type semiconductor. Like here in the diagram, more holes, the color blue, over the electrons. That's why it's positive type semiconductor. Here are the differences between the two. In intrinsic semiconductor, pure but extrinsic impure. Then in intrinsic, the density of electrons is equal to the density of holes. In extrinsic, it is not equal. In intrinsic, electrical conductivity is low, but in extrinsic, electrical conductivity is high. Now, intrinsic semiconductors are dependent on temperature only, while on extrinsic, aside from temperature, it also depends on the amount of impurity. So, in intrinsic, no impurities. In extrinsic, trivalent impurity and pentavalent impurities. Now, there is what we call the p-n junction diode. So, take a look of this GIF. So, what is p-n junction? It is an interface or a boundary between two semiconductor materials, namely the p-type and the n-type inside a semiconductor. You can see that when the p-type and the n-type meet, there is movement of the negative and the positive carriers. They can migrate, and that is called the point where they migrate is called the depletion layer. Okay, how do they form? So we can see in figure 3 the formation of the p-n junction between the n-type and the p-type regions of piece of silicon, for example. This is doped with phosphorus in the top part and with boron in the bottom part. The free electrons in the and the energy region R or the N region are randomly drifting in all directions. So you can see here on figure 1, a silicon atom and covalent bonding forms a crystal structure. So you see that there is now a donor. And now it receives extra free electron from the donor. Okay. Now, again, when they meet, there is diffusion of electrons across the junction. After the initial surge of diffusion, a depletion region forms near the junction and a state of equilibrium is established and there is no further diffusion. There are three biasing conditions such as the zero bias and the forward bias, and the last is the reverse bias. In zero bias, no external voltage is applied to the p-n junction diode. In forward bias, there is positive terminal of the voltage potential is connected to the p-type while the negative terminal is connected to the n-type. Now, lastly, reverse bias. This is, of course, reverse. So, negative terminal of the voltage potential is connected to the positive terminal to the n-type. Okay, you have here the diagram of the forward bias of the p-n junction. Okay, you can see here. And then the reverse bias. Now, how does current flow in p-n junction diode? So the flow of electron from the n side towards the p side of the junction takes place when there is an increase in the voltage. Similarly, the flow of holes from the p side towards the n side of the junction takes place along with the increasing in the voltage. This results in the concentration of gradient between both sides of the terminals. Due to the concentration gradient formation, charge carriers will flow from higher concentration regions to lower concentration regions. The movement of charge carriers inside the p-n junction is the reason behind the current flow in the circuit. Much like in other laws, it again from higher concentration to lower concentration, that is the flow of charge carriers. Okay, now let's go to the characteristics. With the p-n junction diode is zero bias condition, therefore there is no external voltage applied. So meaning there is no potential barrier at the junction and does not allow the current of or the flow of current. But in p-n junction diode, forward bias condition, the p-type is connected to the positive terminal while the n-type is connected to the negative terminal. When the diode is arranged in this manner, there is a reduction in the potential barrier. Like for example, silicon diodes, when the voltage is 0.7 volts, and for germanium diodes, there is 0.3 volts. The potential barriers decreases, therefore there is a flow of current. Now, in forward bias, the current increases slowly, and the curve obtained is nonlinear as the voltage applied to the diode overcomes the potential barrier. Once the diode overcomes the potential barrier, the diode behaves normally, and the curve rises sharply as the external voltage increases, and the curve obtained is linear. So, in negative bias condition, the p-type is connected to the negative terminal and the n-type is connected to the positive terminal of the n external voltage. This will result to increase in potential barrier. Reverse saturation current flows in the beginning as minority carriers are present in the junction. So when the applied voltage increase, the minority charges will have increased kinetic energy which affects the majority charges. This is the stage when the diode breaks down. This may also destroy the diode. Now, what are the uses or applications of the p-n junction diode? Okay, mainly in electronics due to their properties, such as number 1, rectification, where it converts AC or alternating current to direct current. Next is signal demodulation, where diodes are used to recover original modulation signals from AM or FM modulated waveforms. Another is clipping. It can limit voltage levels of the signals, which prevents them from exceeding certain thresholds. Next is clamping. It can be used to clamp a waveform to a certain DC level by preventing it from going below or above a specific threshold. Hence, it maintains the specific voltage levels in circuits and protect the components from voltage spikes. So, p-n junction diodes are fundamental semiconductor devices with broad array of applications in electronics. The common uses of p-n junction diode include the mentioned above. They are also used in various electronic circuits such as voltage multiplier, diode logic circuits, photodiodes, LEDs, photovoltaic cells, RF and microwave applications, and so on. Okay, you have more here, the current steering, diode logic circuits, voltage drop. So, in conclusion, p-n junction diodes are fundamental semiconductor devices with broad array of electronics. Now, for assessment, we have 3 questions here. Number 1, how do energy bands affect electrical conductivity? Number 2, what are some practical applications of energy band theory? And give practical applications of the p-n junction. So these are the references that I used during my research. And that would be all. Thank you very much.